It's Milton with Tucson Loves Music backstage at Stageworks, and we are with CHRIS ARPAD today.
Yes, you are.
Thank you for
so
joining
nice to be
us.
here. Thanks for having me.
Before we start, I'd just like to give thanks to Tucson Loves Music, Paul and Kathy, www.tucsonlovesmusic.com, and Stageworks at 4500 East Speedway Boulevard, Suite 70. Come on down and check them out. So, Chris, what instrument do you play?
I play a trash can, a 55-gallon oil barrel they call a steel drum. Actually, in Trinidad, they call it a steel pan. United States, we call it a steel drum. But that's what it is right here behind us.
So,
quite literally made from 55-gallon oil barrels.
So if you play the steel drums, can you play the traditional drums, or are they just a distinct
I
instrument?
started off playing drums when I was like 10. I remember being in like 9 years old, and I was trying to decide whether I wanted to be an artist or if I was going to be a musician. And I was sitting there thinking about, well, I've got all this artwork around the house and Mom's got no place to put it. What am I going to do with that? And then we had the field trip to go see the fifth grade class put on a concert at the junior high. Well, it was a middle school. And I watched Mark Wash play a drum roll on a snare drum. And that was it. I was hooked. So when I came to the middle school and it was time to pick an instrument, I went straight over and sat by the snare drum when they went to do you're supposed to try out and pick two. And I wasn't having two. I said, Dad, come on, we're sitting right over here. And we sat down by the drum. Came time to audition for the drum. And said, great, what's your second choice? And I said, there isn't one. If you don't have room for me as a drummer in your band, then I'm not going to be in your band. So I got to play drums. And I just played everything possible in my town of McPherson, Kansas. So I'm in concert band, marching band. I was in the orchestra, jazz band. I played in the pit orchestra for the orchestras, the community bands, and I was even tapped to play with the City of McPherson Bagpipe Band. I led the drum corps with that for many years. So anything that had a drum, I was all about it. And that's what I basically started off with, was the drum set. It wasn't until I got to college that I was introduced to the steel drums.
Well, before you got to college, I read somewhere that you were touring around as a 15-year-old?
Yeah.
What's that about?
My very first band was called Southern Comfort, led by Jerry Driscoll. And it was Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys style swing, country swing music. We had twin fiddles in the band and a steel guitar. And he was having a hard time finding the drummers. And of course, word got around and he came to me and asked me to sit in and play in his band. And I said, sure. At the time, I think I was painting signs at the grocery store for a job. So I got my first professional job playing in a country band. And they were all much older than me, 50s, 60s. You know, we'd go out and play the American Legion and the Elks Hall and all this. And one of the craziest gigs was, see, Jerry had a crop dusting business, an aerial crop dusting plane. And he was going to have the band play for his high school reunion in Oklahoma. So the rest of the guys in the band took my drums in the trailer and they drove, and Jerry flew me and his wife and his crop dusting plane out, and all of his buddies were lined up out there by the lake. And of course, being a crop duster, he had to buzz them. So we did what crop dusters do, flying way down low. And I tell you, if I would have had a fishing pole, I could have trolled out of that airplane. We were so close to the water. And I was like, this is the craziest first gig I'm ever going to live. If I live to tell about it, I'm thinking about all the rock stars who went down in flames, you know. But I knew how to swim, so if we went down in the water, it was okay. But we did it, and I just started traveling around with him, learning all the country music, and doing that for the longest time. So Southern Comfort. And it turns out that one of the guitarists in that band was inducted into the Hall of Fame for the country swing guitarists, Milford Weedle. Quite a name to look up. And the lessons learned in that. I remember one night we were playing in Spivey, Kansas, and there's a rainstorm much like what's going on out here, and the lights went out, the electricity went off. So we just had the fiddles playing, and I'm playing drums. And we just kept going, and people kept dancing in the dark until the power came back on. So that was one of the mantras that I learned early on, is the show must go on. Kept playing.
So as you got a little bit older, how did the Ringling Brothers and P.T. Barnum come into the picture?
Well, I decided I was going to study music, and the only two options that I could see was a performance degree or being a music teacher. And a performance degree didn't make any sense to me, because not once had I ever been asked when I played anywhere, do you have a degree? You can either play or you can't. So the only thing that made sense was to get a music degree in education. So I was studying to be a music teacher. And I was looking around for what college to go to. And at the time, J.C. Combs was running the percussion department at Wichita State University. And to meet J.C. Combs, it's like meeting P.T. Barnum. It was incredible. This guy had percussion ensemble concerts where they would bring in pinball machines and take the glass off. Music is written, and you play with a mallet to strike the thing to make the pinball machine make its noises. So imagine a bunch of pinball, and his Pinball Wizard was the theme of the concert. And another concert, he had live wrestlers on stage in a ring doing their wrestling, and all of the percussionists are around the outside. I was privileged enough to be the Velcro tap dancer for one of his numbers. So I had shoes with Velcro on the bottom and the opposite one on a little stand, and it was a whole thing where I'd stand up there like I was a virtuoso with a violin, and everybody played along with it, and I'm doing tap dance maneuvers that are in reverse to get the scratchy sounds coming off. So I decided I had to go to school there. And I went to a concert, I think, while I was still in high school. And the percussion ensemble part was nice, it was cool, and I saw all those neat things. But during the intermission, they had the steel drum band playing outside in the lobby. And when that started in, I was like, whoa, what is that? I got hooked. And I didn't even know at the time. So that was the whole thing. I just had to go to school there. This whole circus thing actually started when I was in high school. I had been playing in the pit orchestra for all the musicals. I was asked when I was in junior high to go play for the senior high school. And I'm learning how to play nice and soft and play, use my ears and listen and play. And I played all the great musicals. We played South Pacific. We did Oklahoma, all the Brigadoon. So I was getting a good education in case I thought I might want to be a pit orchestra player in New York or something like that. That's where I was looking at it. But my senior year, they decided that they were going to do P.T. Barnum. Now, up to this time, I hadn't been in choir, and my mom had heard me sing. Well, I went and I auditioned for every single part, and I wound up getting the lead in P.T. Barnum as P.T. Barnum. And there's like 16 numbers in that entire musical, and I was singing in 10 of them. So I come home and I tell my mom, hey, guess what? I just got the lead in the school musical. And she was flabbergasted. She, well, don't they know you can't sing?
Thanks, Mom.
Well, she didn't know. I was like, well, I auditioned, and I guess they think I can, so I did. And that was a pivotal moment for me, just pulling that off. And I also had my farm accident, so I was dealing with wearing like a buildup in my right shoe of 1.5 inches. So changing costumes in between numbers was quite the chore. My little brother was backstage helping me with changing of my clothes to get on set for the next scene and all of that. But so I'm playing in the country band, I'm doing the high school musical, I'm playing in everything I can. I decide to go off to college at Wichita State. So here comes more circus. Normally, there's kind of a hierarchy. I had about 20 or 30 percussion majors in my class, and the pecking order usually goes to the upperclassmen. And one of my upperclassmen, Steve Hatfield, a phenomenal drummer, teaches at WSU today, actually. He had a gig for me. He said, do you want to play a gig cover for me at the state fair? I'm like, are you kidding? Of course I do. So he gave me the particulars and sent me off to go do the gig. And I get there and I find out it's at the rodeo grounds, dusty, dirty, and I'm playing for a rodeo clown, Tommy Lucia and his horse Glory. Well, the joke of the whole thing is the horse has got to sway back, and you don't know that because it comes out covered with blankets. And you're playing the whole routine with the stripper music, and each time the horse reaches around and grabs a blanket and pulls it off, and slowly but slowly you start seeing the back swaying and swaying even more and more until it's revealed that the horse has got a huge sway back. Well, all that's fine and dandy up until we get to the point where I'm supposed to sight read and play a rim shot. The horse is trained on command to drop a load, and I'm required to sight read the equine bow movement with a rim shot. Ba-dum-ksh. And I thought to myself after that gig, if this is a hazing moment, not too funny, but if this is either the pinnacle or the start of my career, everything is uphill from there. So the next thing that came up shortly thereafter, the circus came to town, the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. Now the circus travels with two shows, or at least they did. There was a blue show and a red show. This was the red show. They came in by train, and they normally travel with a lead trumpet, guitar, bass, drums, and keyboard. So they have a basic rhythm section, and then they hire all the horn players from the local union to fill out the rest of the band. Turns out that the drummer's wife was having her baby, and he was still back in Dallas, Texas, didn't make the train in. So they're frantically calling the union looking for a drummer to sit in and play. They normally hire a percussionist too. And that usually goes to the head, like Dr. Combs would have been asked first, and all the union members and the upperclassmen. But the kicker is there was no drums and there was no music. So you're doing, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 hours, but it seemed so long, yet so fast. But there was no music, and nobody wanted to step into the Kansas Coliseum and play drums and not know what they were getting into. But foolishly, I'm like, I'll do it. So I had to borrow my roommate's drum set and show up to play for the circus. And I can just remember the first sound check hitting that bass drum. It sounded like a cannon through that huge stadium. And all the excitement of the clowns and the animals and everything going around. And we didn't even play through all of the numbers for the rehearsal. They just kind of touched on it, the cue points for all the horn players. And next thing I know, it was showtime. And it was like white knuckle experience, hang on by the seat of your pants. And one part of the show, they bring in the Ring of Death, the big circle cage, and have the motorcycles in there. And I'm supposed to play Led Zeppelin to that. It starts off with the drums leading it, and I'm just pounding away and going at it. And I look down, and something's wrong with the bass drum pedal. The bass drum beater came off in the middle of the piece, and I'm looking around. The guitarist and the bassist were kind of coaching me, giving me heads up, what's coming up next, whatever. And he's like, what's wrong? And he looked down and he saw that my bass drum beater had flown off, and all I had was the rod that was getting ready to poke a hole right through the bass drum. He takes his guitar off, drops down between my feet, puts the beater back in place while we're playing nonstop, and the motorcycles are racing and roaring, and I just kept going. And it was just like, I don't know how we even got through it. I'd come away from those gigs sopping wet with sweat, but exhilarated beyond compare. So that performance, The Greatest Show on Earth, was the first time David Larrable, who was an Italian clown, was headlining, famous clown. And he does a routine where, again, I wasn't playing for a horse pooping, but I had to follow him around and play drum fills and everything to his antics, and I'm just watching and just playing the whole thing. So it was an incredible experience. Finally on Sunday, the last day, the real drummer came and showed up, and I got to see how it was supposed to go.
So do you think these experiences, winging it and succeeding, helped build your confidence and,
For sure.
and your success as a solo performer?
Well, like I said, the show had to go on, and I learned from those experiences, when you're starting out, just to say yes to opportunities that came my way. and especially if it looked like what I call a white knuckle experience, because you really can't lose in those situations. Nobody else wanted to do it anyway because they were afraid of losing face or not being able to do it or failing. And I figured, well, if I do fail, no one's going to fault me for it. But if you pull it off, you become the hero. It's like one of those scripted things, like your favorite rock star is playing at a concert and they pick you out of the crowd and say, you, come up and play, and you get your chance. That's what it felt like for me. And from that point on, I thought, I'm in it to win it. I'm going full bore. Whatever comes my way, I say yes and I go do it. So yeah, for sure, that definitely started it for me.
And then how do you adapt such diverse music to the steel drums? I took a look at your set list and I was like, wow, this is like from A to Z, literally.
Yeah. Well, I had a band for 5.5 years, and we did mostly original music. We had a keyboardist from Colombia, South America, and I always say he had the heart and soul of the band because he was a computer major at the time, business major, and he was writing music that he heard and he could just hear, self-taught. And he would come to the band and say, hey guys, I wrote this song, and then he'd start playing it. And then I had another steel drummer, Dyke. I tapped him to be the band arranger. So he would arrange the music for the band, and then I was the band manager. So I was booking the gigs and emceeing the show and playing in the band and doing all that. So we had a lot of, you can see it on my website, there's like the chronicles of the band. It was called Stainless Steel. That was the name, the Midwest only steel drum band at the time. And that opened a lot of doors because into songwriting and all of that. But the band didn't want to play cover tunes. And I'm trying to book us into the country clubs, and I'm trying to make some money with it. And so we kind of were rubbing and butting heads along the ways with that. And then at one point, we had to all go our different ways, you know. And I started going down to playing solo, just playing the steel drums, and I would venture down to South Padre Island, Texas. I get down there and check the scene out and play, and I managed to get some gigs there. And people started requesting, well, could you put a beat machine to that? At the time, late 80s, Dr. Boss drum machine was all the rage. And so you could program some beats, but it sounded like a metronome to me. I wasn't too thrilled with that, but I did that for a while. And people would this is when I started learning about Jimmy Buffett, because they wanted to hear Margaritaville, and you could play it, but then they want to hear you sing it. So I started singing it, learning to sing and play. It's just kind of like playing drum set with a coordination thing, and developed the tunes as I went along. And eventually made my way out to California. Everyone started batting down the hatches, and I didn't know what was going on. They said, well, the spring breakers are coming. They don't tip, and they tear the place apart like a horde of locusts or something. So I'm like, oh my God, I better get out of here. And my buddy, Rick Musalam, was already out in California. We worked together at a music store and had roomed together, and he played in the band with me, and he was already out in LA. So I called him up and said, hey, can I come? He said, sure. So I kept driving and driving and driving. It's a long ways from Texas to California. And I showed up, and my first gig there, I landed a gig. Roseanne Barr was hosting a birthday party for her then husband, Benjamin. And she did it at Tarzana. There was a ball diamond there, and she brought her full party, all wearing baseball jerseys with Benjamin on the back. And they pull up in a school bus, and boom, all the lights come on, and any steel drummer that was in town got to play on that gig. And then they rolled around and partied and danced and drank and made a huge mess of themselves, but I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, this is all right. So I decided LA was the place to be, and I started doing my solo thing there. I wound up getting a laptop computer and mixing what I was missing. I couldn't hear. I didn't hear the bass, I didn't hear the guitars, I was missing the organs and the horns, and so I started programming that in with MIDI. I did that for a number of years until Windows 10 came along and my USB to MIDI cable didn't work anymore, and I had to switch gears, and I got into doing M4A's files are what I'm doing now. So I mix the tracks and I put it on my phone. And that allows me to play all kinds of music. So I'm playing all these private parties, people saying, hey, do you know Freebird? You know, a classic thing that you hear. So not today, but I will tomorrow. And I go home and immediately learn, well, how about a reggae version of Freebird? Here you go. So the next time a wise apple pops up and says something like that, I give it to him in spades, and then that opens more doors, and the next thing you know, I'm playing everything from Steely Dan to Willie Nelson to you name it. I just keep playing.
I can name it because I wrote a whole lot of stuff down here. Casey and the Sunshine Band, Led Zeppelin, Neil Diamond to Neil Young, Otis Redding, Peter Frampton, Pink Floyd, Steve Miller, Styx, Sublime, and that's just a small amount of your set list there. So,
well, I would go through different phases. I got jobs in Los Angeles playing for the Cayman Islands Division of Tourism. So when I was doing that, I started learning some more reggae. Of course, they liked the calypso music and all of that, so that opened some doors. And I would do tours with them, going up around to, they would book nice rooms at hotel ballrooms and bring all the travel agents in. It was like their dog and pony show, wine and dine them, and I play the music for 45 minutes. And then they give them a spiel about Cayman Islands and give away a fam trip to one of the agents, and then we go on to the next one. And so that got me around quite a bit of Southern California. I got to open a lot of doors. All that died after 9/11. I was doing a whole series of playing over on Catalina Island, which is a very special place for me, and played at the Catherine Hotel quite a bit over there. And actually that's where I was during 9/11. I went over to do a big gig at Descanso Beach, and we got the word with the planes coming in and everything, and we took the very last boat because they closed the harbor, and we got back off of the island just in time, and that was surreal. I did a whole different, it seems like it kind of came in waves. I would do a cycle of tours. I did an event for I can't even think of their name. It was a distillery ship for Appleton Rum. And they did a promotion. If a location bought 2 cases of their premium rum, they got a party. And they would send me in with some, I called them my handlers, the girls giving out the merch. And we put on a beach party wherever the club was. And that got me in to open for Foreigner, Los Lobos, you know, different events like that in San Diego. And in my early days, we had opened for Santana and Bonnie Raitt and Steel Pulse. And so I had a kind of a flavor for doing all those. And I don't know how it came around, but I got tapped to open for Jimmy Buffett in 2000, which doing the solo thing, not with a band or anything, just the way I play now. And so I learned tons more Jimmy Buffett tunes. Of course, nobody really wants to hear all of Jimmy Buffett when you're going to hear Jimmy Buffett. So I was learning other tunes that would fit in, and did well enough that they had me back again the next year. And that opened more doors. And really, it's the private parties and everywhere I go. I mean, I'm learning so much more here. Tucson has its own flavor of things
what
that
does
they
a
like.
Tucson show look like?
Well, it depends. And that's why I have the hardest time with describing what I do. Because if you want a Jimmy Buffett theme, we do Jimmy Buffett music. If you want Bob Marley, you know, then we're doing a whole reggae thing. You know, throw in some Alpha Blondie, and we do all the reggae that they want to hear. But oftentimes, it's more of the country bent. So I bring out some Eagles and Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, whatever it is they want to hear. I started playing some of the senior centers here, and they want to hear Pretty Woman. And they throw down and have parties. I mean, they have a happy hour with a full bar, and they dance, and it's a great time in the middle of the afternoon. So I get their request, you know, 50s and 60s music. I throw that in for them. So how do you know, they might play a cocktail hour for a corporate event, and we call those wallpaper gigs because you're just kind of in the background, and I'm just being felt more than listened to, you know. But here again, you can just keep the party going, and they're tapping along, and you see somebody dancing, and you play to it. So I like to read the room. I see someone in a bar that walks in with a cowboy hat, and I have to shift gears and cover them.
Right.
Somebody else is looking, I got to pull out Sublime, doing some West Coast reggae.
So you have done just a ton of different events, and you're still willing to do pretty much any type of event? Big events, small events?
I've done divorces, I've done weddings, bar mitzvahs, quinceaneras, graduation parties. I've opened for mausoleums. I've played in Trader Joe's. I've played in department stores. I do educational shows, playing at schools. And I tell you what, it's quite an energetic thing to play for youngsters at a school.
What about
the energy there? Oh my gosh!
What about Tucson has a lot of festivals and a lot of bands that are always looking for people to sit in with them. Is that something that you do or willing to do?
Sit in with them? Oh, for sure. For a while I was being hired for the Island Flavor. Bruce Garnett's band in California hired me to come in and he needed the steel drums for those key songs, Margaritaville, Kokomo, and that sort of thing. And there'd be full-on singers and horns. I mean, it might be a 9-piece band, and I was part of it. So I'd play percussion, congas, bongos, whatever's required, tambourine, and then switch over and play steel drums for those numbers. And then he would use me like I do now, where the band has to take a break and then have me stay out and play during their break. And then we switch. The band comes back out, I'll play a couple other numbers, and then I go in and have a break. And on one of those numbers, I was back there with the caterers in the garage on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, and I'm having my break eating coconut shrimp, and in stumbles Dick Van Dyke doing his prank falls. And I nearly choked on my shrimp, and I'm like, shrimp? I'm back there eating shrimp with Dick Van Dyke. And he said, wow, I just absolutely love when you did Lion Sleeps Tonight. And so that stays with me, and I play that every chance I get. So yeah, I'll sit in with bands and when I get a chance, and that's always fun. And sometimes I wind up doing what I do with the band too. You just never know. But I'm open to all areas. I'm just an entertainer. And whatever they want to hear, I want to play. And I'm obsessed with it now. Somebody requests something that I haven't heard, and I have to go home and immediately learn it, put it together, track it out, so I have it ready to go. I've played some very obscure things. One of the craziest ones I had, they said, now don't laugh, but well, laugh if you want, but don't be afraid. We want you to play Dead Puppies. And I'm like, what did you say? Dead Puppies from the Dr. Demento show. And so I had to learn it because it was for one of their party. It was inside family jokes,
Everyone loves Dr. Demento.
I even learned Gin and Juice, Snoop Dogg, to play at a funeral at a Catholic church in Inglewood, California, because Grandpa liked his gin and juice.